Well, a warm welcome to this talk. Now, we're having heat waves quite a few places in the world now, so I want to do a brief video on heat stroke. So let's get straight down to the main things that we need to know about. Heat stroke is acute hyperthermia. High, the body temperature goes too high. It's caused by prolonged exposure to hot, often humid, not necessarily, but often humid environments. Humidity makes it worse. Physical exercise in the heat is another main cause, and we normally say heat strokes occurring when the temperature is above 104, that's 40 degrees centigrade, or 105, that's 40.6 degrees centigrade. Now, this is a medical emergency, and the person often doesn't realise that they are in danger because their brain is so hot it's not working properly. So there can be disorientation, aggression, denial, all these sort of things. These people need organised and managed to bring their temperature down because they probably won't realise. They won't feel good, but they won't know why they're not feeling good. So the disorientation is a real danger factor here. And if this isn't treated, it can quickly damage the brain, the heart, the kidneys and the muscles. And the damage worsens if treatment is delayed. And of course, this is a potential life-threatening condition. The person will become unconscious after the disorientation phase. And if it's not treated, they will simply die. And if it's left to go on for long enough, even if they do recover, then they can die subsequently in the days, weeks, months, or even in the year after the extreme heat stroke episode. So that's the main things we want to get across. Now let's look at the symptoms here. High body temperature. Now, if you've got the luxury of a thermometer, of course, do use one. I've got one of these new electronic ones here. See if I can just get a temperature. You just tend to point these at somewhere hot. So my temperature at the moment is 37 degrees centigrade, which is 98.4, 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, which of course is quite normal. Now, if you were unsure what someone's body temperature is and you did have one of these devices, then try taking the temperature, in the ear if you've got a device getting in the ear, or in the mouth, so somewhere fairly central, or in one of the big arteries where you can point it at to get an accurate reading. So high body temperature. The person, very often when you touch them, if you just touch them, they'll often feel hot. In the early stages, the skin will feel hot. Although if the hyperthermia is already established, the skin can actually start feeling cool in the later stages. So you've got to look at this in the behavioural symptoms context of the condition. Altered mental state or behaviour. Now, this can appear like someone who's low on blood sugar, someone who's hypoglycemic and diabetes, or it can appear like drunkenness. So there can be disorientation, agitation, headache, denial, non-cooperation, even aggression. Sometimes these patients really need to be quite assertively managed because of the altered mental state. It's because the brain is simply too hot to function properly. The brain itself, of course, is hyperthermic. The brain is too hot to work. Skin often hot and dry and red at first. Of course, it's supposed to be red because when we're hot, we're supposed to peripherally vasodilate to try and cool us off together with sweating. These are the body's main cooling mechanisms. So very often the skin's red at first, but later on it can be pale because, again, these mechanisms can fail with time because the blood vessels won't work at very high temperatures properly either. Nausea, the patients tend to feel pretty awful. There can be vomiting. The heart rate, tachycardia, fast heart rate. If you take the pulse or put your hand on the chest and feel the heart, or feel for if you can feel for like a central vein in the neck, heart's beating very quickly. And tachypnoea is rapid breathing as well. So often they're breathing rapidly with a bit of panting. Usually they have a headache. Now, this is a medical emergency, so get help, because it's an emergency, and get them cooled. Now, I put get them cooled in big letters because they, to put it quite bluntly, are too stupid to cool themselves very often in this situation. They don't have the insight because they don't have the brain function. You need to get them cool. And as well as that, there's a failure of the body's thermoregulatory mechanism. So normally the hypothalamus in the brain should recognise we're getting too hot, bring the body temperature down. But of course this mechanism is being overwhelmed. That's why they've become hyperthermic. That's why they've developed this heat stroke. So we need to use artificial means like cooling them in water, spraying them with water, putting them in the shade, fanning them, all these things that are going to get the temperatures down. We have to do this as an emergency first aid measure to get the temperature down, because we can't rely on the patient's own physiology to get the temperature down. We have to help them with that, and we have to help the body's physiology with that. So that's one of the key things to remember on this. It's get them cooled. They need an active cooling process, because this is a dangerous condition. Now, what are the factors in hyperthermia, in heat stroke? Well, clearly excessive heat production, exercise particularly. Now, I've actually come across this in bakery workers working hard in a very hot baking house when they were baking bread and cakes and things. But it's also classic in labourers working outdoors, sports activities, and another classic one is the military. Particularly in the military, where people might be wearing full combats, carrying kit, exercising uphill, especially if they've got a lot of clothes on. They can't cool down. They're very tough, so they keep going. There's been tragic deaths in the military. Because they're tough, they don't want to let their mates down, they keep going, and they become physiologically heat stroke, physiologically hyperthermic, and you can't overcome that physiology. No matter how tough you are, it can still kill you. Excessive environmental heat, so things like getting too much sun, so clearly to avoid the sun, and the humidity. So the main way that the body is going to keep itself cool, of course, is by sweating. As the sweat evaporates, it takes what we call the latent heat of vaporization out of the body. That cools the body really, really quite efficiently. But in humid environments, if the environments are already humid, I've actually worked in conditions in Thailand, for example, in Cambodia, with over 90% humidity, and the sweat can't dry. And you can get really hot, even if the temperature is only about 30 degrees centigrade, you can still get really hot. You get really sweaty, but the sweat can't dry. So humidity is an additional risk factor, as well as the temperature. In dry environments, it's usually possible to tolerate hotter conditions than in humid environments, as long as you've got plenty to drink and the sweat can keep being produced and the sweat can keep evaporating. So excessive heat, environmental heat, of course, impaired heat loss, clothing, dehydration. So if someone's dehydrated, they're not going to be able to make the sweat, and they won't be able to lose the heat through this latent heat of vaporization. Alcohol is another factor as well. So the key thing, even working in hot environments, and most of us can work in quite hot environments as long as we drink lots of water. So the key thing is to drink enough water so that you're weeing normal amounts of urine. So if you're in a very hot environment, you should be having regular wheeze, regular passing of urine, and that should be fairly light coloured. So if you're drinking enough, even in really, really hot environments, you can still pass large amounts of very dilute urine as long as you're drinking enough. If the urine starts to become darker coloured and more concentrated, that means you're not drinking enough. If you haven't had I've been in this situation at work, you think, just a minute, I haven't had a wee for 3 or 4 hours. It's because you've forgotten to take a drink. You have to keep drinking, because thirst only kicks in when you're already really quite dehydrated. So there's no good saying, well, I'll just have a drink when I'm thirsty, because by that time you can already be significantly dehydrated. So as a rule of thumb, you want to be passing, I normally recommend at least 2 litres of urine per day. So drink, so you're producing at least 2 litres of urine a day, regardless of the hot environment you're working in. Of course, if you can drink more than that, then so much the better. Alcohol, as we said, can mess up your thermoregulatory mechanisms. So nothing like a nice cool glass of lager, of course, in the sun when it's hot, and that's absolutely fine if you're in a cool, shady taverna somewhere on your holidays, or in the shade in your back garden, that's absolutely fine. But if you're in a hot environment, alcohol would be contraindicated if hyperthermia is a risk. Risk factors, young children. Now, of course, the thermoregulatory mechanisms are controlled in the hypothalamus in the brain, and they're regulated via the nervous system. And in young children, the nervous system's still forming. Over the age of 65, the nervous system is deteriorating. So these people can control their body temperatures less efficiently. And so children 3, 4, 5, the nervous system still developing. Children under the age of 2 particularly can't control their body temperatures. They need to be looked after particularly carefully that their body temperature doesn't rise. But even up to sort of 9, 10, 11, 12-year-olds, the temperature regulation isn't going to be as good as young fit adults. So bear that in mind. Time to acclimatise. This is a big factor, especially if there's a sudden heat wave, or we jet off to somewhere really hot for our holidays, or we jet off to the tropics or something. Dion Bell was my professor in tropical medicine training in Liverpool when I did some training in Liverpool, and he said it takes a minimum of 10 days to tropically acclimatise, a minimum of 10 days. And acclimatisation will go on for some weeks after that. So if you've just gone off somewhere warm, or you've got a sudden influx of hot weather and you're not used to it, it's going to take you days, if not weeks, to acclimatise. So we're at greater risk until that acclimatisation has occurred, and there's numerous physiological adaptations that go on inside the body, but they take time to develop. So if you've just jetted off somewhere hot, best not to go for a 5-mile run that night. You need days and even weeks to fully acclimatise. Lack of air conditioning and fans. When I started working in the tropics, we didn't have air conditioning. We did have fans, but you certainly got quite hot. Air conditioning, of course, is a luxury. Trouble with air conditioning is you feel even hotter when you go outside. Medications. Certain medications can predispose to heat stroke and hyperthermia. Beta blockers, diuretics, which make you wee more, some antidepressants, some antipsychotics, and classically amphetamines and cocaine, which we wouldn't really want to take at any time, and especially if it was hot, unless it was under very close medical supervision. Chronic illnesses, heart disease, lung disease, obesity is a big factor, and indeed lack of physical fitness is a factor as well. So how are we going to prevent hyperthermia? Good hydration is key. Loose fitting, lightweight clothing so you can get plenty of air circulation. If the clothes are tight fitting, you're not getting the air circulation near the surface of the skin. That means you're not getting the direct cooling effect of the air, but more importantly, you're not getting the drying effect of the air, drying the sweat to generate this, or to extract this latent heat of vaporization from the surface of the body. Prevent sunburn. Well, you want to prevent sunburn anyway, but skin which is burnt is going to be much less capable of normal thermoregulation. Don't work out when it's the middle of the day. If you've got a manual job, rearrange the work schedule so you're working early in the morning or later in the evening if at all possible. I'm not going to beguile you with or terrify you or horrify us with the statistics of the amount of children that die in parked cars, but it still happens. Quite inexcusable. Everyone should know about that now. Temperatures can go up really dramatically in cars, animals, children, old people. Be very careful. And of course, take your time and acclimatise. So that's the basis of what I wanted to say about this for the hot weather. Just throw in a bit of science for those of you that are interested. In hyperthermia, the hypothalamus, which is the hypothalamus is the bit of the brain, it's above the top of your mouth there, just above the pituitary gland, and as the name would expect, suggest hypothalamus is just below the thalamus in the centre of the brain. So the hypothalamus is our thermoregulatory thermostat, and when you have a fever, the set point goes up, so your body deliberately goes up to getting a higher temperature. We become pyrexial. But in hyperthermia, the set point of the hypothalamus is 37 degrees centigrade, roughly, 98.4, 98.6, whatever the equivalent is in Fahrenheit. It's 98.6, I think. So that is set as normal, but the temperature is actually higher than that. It's failed. This is a failure of thermoregulatory homeostasis. So it's overwhelmed. Failure of thermoregulatory homeostatic mechanisms. Unlike fever, where the set point is deliberately increased by these intracellular messengers called cytokines. So if you've got a fever, the body has deliberately raised the body temperature. It's quite a deliberate thing, the cytokine prostaglandin-based mechanisms in the hypothalamus that respond to these cytokines, and it deliberately increases the body temperature. But this is not like that. This is the overwhelming of the normal functions. Enzymes, of course, as anyone knows from basic science, work at specific temperatures and pH, so they won't work properly. Pro-inflammatory cytokines are released as a result of the heat. That causes inflammation. There can be damage to the vascular endothelium, the lining of the blood vessels, and when there's damage to the vascular endothelium, that can cause platelet aggregation and start off intravascular blood clotting, which of course we don't want blood clotting within the blood vessels. Eventually there can be thermocoagulation. So the tissue, the proteins will denature. This is what happens when you cook an egg. You crack an egg into the frying pan. Initially, the albumin, the white part, is quite clear, as it's supposed to be, but then it goes white, it goes cloudy. That's because of the thermal denaturing of the proteins and the thermocoagulation, and that can happen to our tissues as well, particularly the brain, and of course that would be irreversible damage if it got to that stage. And disruption of the intestinal barriers means that bacteria can get from the gut into the bloodstream. Now, fit people that are exercising, if you're exercising, it's quite normal actually for your body temperature to go up to 40 degrees centigrade, and that they will get better normally spontaneously once they rest in the cool. So this is a slightly different situation. The hyperthermia, it's where there's these environmental factors or the lack of the cooling factors that's caused the body temperature to rise. You could argue that during exercise a high body temperature is normal, because of course we if we're cool we exercise to warm up sometimes, don't we? But it's still a big risk factor exercising in hot conditions, especially if you're wearing kit and you can't evaporate the sweat. So take care, but do bear in mind that it can be normal, but it can progress beyond the normal into this situation where the brain is unable to downregulate its own body temperatures. Now, heat exhaustion, another form of heat condition really. Heat exhaustion is where this tends to come on more slowly, and this is caused by dehydration, as people become dehydrated over time. And also when you sweat, of course, you're sweating out salt, particularly sodium chloride, and over time someone can become salt depleted, causing typically muscle cramps. Classically this is called stoker's cramp, because it was recognised in people that stoked the steam engines and they were working in very hot, sweaty environments. Miners also used to be prone to this. That's why it's necessary to replace the salts as well as the water if we've been very hot. But the main thing is, in this situation, get people cooled down. Use water, spray them, put them in cold water, give them lots to drink, but take management of that situation and get them cooled down. Our best ally in the cooling process is using water, splashing them, putting them in water, getting people cooled down as quickly as possible, because it's a medical emergency. So hope that helped, and thank you for watching.